From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today I'll be reviewing the movie Underworld, released in 2003. Starring Kate Beckinsale, Scott Speedman, and Shane Brolly. Directed by Lynn Wiseman. Genre: action fantasy thriller. Rating: R. Budget: $22 million estimated. My rating is a 9.0. The synopsis is, in the Underworld, there is a 6,000-year-old war between vampires and werewolves. A werewolf assassin vampire by the name of Selene uncovers a master plan that involves a human by the name of Michael Corvin, whose bloodline could possibly end the war. Enjoyment. I love vampire movies and werewolves, so this kind of movie got an elevated enjoyment out of me by default. There's a lot of problems with the film, which keeps it from being my absolute favorite film, but it's extremely enjoyable to me. I liked it a lot. The pacing. The pacing is where I had the most issue with the film. It's 2 hours and a minute long, and it's absolutely too slow. There's lots of recycled scenes, and it's almost as if they didn't trust the audience to actually get what they were watching. So there are, like I said, lots of repeats, and so yeah, we got it. Let's move on. The story begins with a lot of exposition, and it keeps going on, and I loved it because at times the story is so tragically beautiful. The movie was initially pitched as a Romeo and Juliet for vampires and werewolves, which is exactly what it is, a tragic love story. The story was written by Kevin Grevioux, Lynn Wiseman, and Danny McBride. The story idea itself came from Kevin Grevioux. White Wolf Inc. and author Nancy Collins filed a lawsuit against Sony Pictures, Screen Gems, and Lakeshore Entertainment for copyright infringement. I've actually read some of her books, in particular In the Blood and Wild Blood, which have many similarities to the story. In both books, she explores secret societies of vampires and werewolves within our culture. The suit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. But to be completely honest, it's not an entirely rare idea because fights between vampires and werewolves are in movies like The Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman was released in 1972. The battle between the werewolf and Dracula presented in Van Helsing released a year later after this movie in 2004. And then famously in the werewolf-vampire fight for Bella in Twilight, released in 2008. It's an idea that has been pondering society for a long time. Classically, werewolves were kindred to the vampire and part of the Children of the Night, and in fact many vampires can change into werewolves, as presented in Dracula, released in 1978. And also Bram Stoker's Dracula, released in 1992. And let us not forget the incredible transformation of Evil Ed in Fright Night that was released in 1985. This film borrows many scenes from other films. When Selene is cornered by the Lycans and fires guns into the floor in order to escape. This was seen in the film Nemesis, released in 1992. In the film, Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1953. The police were actually werewolves. In Alien in 1979, there's a shot of hanging chains with water dripping from it above, and there's a scene in this film as well mirroring that. At the start of the movie, when Selene encounters a werewolf in the train tunnel, you hear a wolf howl. The sound effect is taken directly from An American Werewolf in London, released in 1981. It's actually one of my favorite sound effects ever. Lucian stabs through the roof of a car with a long blade, as the T-1000 did in the elevator scene in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, released in 1991. Selene even gets cut on her shoulder like Sarah Connor did in the film. In fact, if you look at that entire scene where Lucian actually chases the car and jumps on top of it, that too mirrors a scene where the T-1000 chases a car and jumps on it. The only thing that's missing is that epic Terminator music. However, when you watch that scene, the music is very, very similar to Terminator. In Blade 1998, blood is irrigated to drip to a specific point to awaken a superior vampire. And the story throws a little foreshadowing for us when Selene stares at Victor's tomb near the beginning of the film, foreshadowing that she will eventually summon him back to life. The challenge in this film. The challenge is murky because there are so many villains presented in this film, but some are revealed not to be evil at all. It all begins with a war between vampires and werewolves. And the werewolves in this film are referred to as lichens. The vampires in this film are the aristocrats, elitists, with the sole intention of exterminating lichens. The lichens are the lower class, the former slaves of the vampires who live beneath ground. They are just defending themselves as they are actively being hunted in this film and trying to figure out how to stop the war. So this is not just a war between enemies, this is a war between classes, rich and poor. At first the lichens seem to be the bad guys as we see them being pit against our protagonist, Selene. They seem to be many times stronger than the vampires, and now armed with UV bullets and a very dangerous plan to destroy the vampires. But actually they are only puppets in a plan. There's a vampire by the name of Craven who has manipulated his way through the top through lies and plans on using the lichens so that he can become head of all vampires. He has the makings of a great villain, seeking after power, but it turns sour when the subplot is revealed that he desires Selene to be his bride. They have no chemistry to be found between the two of them, and he shows absolutely no interest in supporting anything Selene presents as a concern. There's scenes upon scenes of him refuting what she's saying, and she is yelling at him about something that he should do, and he's saying, no, you're crazy, none of what you're saying makes sense, and it's really boring and tired. And to be brutally honest, it's a story plot that has no gravity, and so he fails as an impressive villain and only hits just one note. Victor, however, is the villain's villain in this film. Victor is one of the elder vampires kept in hibernation in the Coven's tomb. Selene breaks the rules of the vampire coven and awakens him a full century earlier than he is supposed to, because she fears that some treachery is at work and only he can set things right. Right off the bat, we know that Victor is thoroughly pissed off about that. Now Selene is right, and Victor is probably in her debt for waking him, but what she has done must be punished, and instead of being there when he awakes, she leaves the coven to help a lichen. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back, even though she does what she does to save the vampires from an unexpected annihilation. Victor is a great villain because he believes he is doing something noble. His motives are crystal clear. From his point of view, vampires and lichens should be separated and most definitely not meant to breed together. He calls hybrids of the two an abomination. He is self-righteously doing all of this just to preserve the purity of the vampire species, even at the cost of his own children. Victor and Selene share a unique history together because he has adopted her as a child. He loves Selene in his own strange way, and you can see his tenderness for her. But in the same breath, he is ready to condemn her to death. He wants to make an example of her publicly to display his dedication to the vampire coven. It's all about appearances here. To him, the responsibility of leading, protecting, and nurturing the coven is more important than his own personal needs. In his mind, he is a hero for the vampire collective, and that makes him a fantastic villain. The empathy here in this film. I have a lot of empathy for the protagonist in the story, Selene. Selene, according to the writer and actor Kevin Graveau, was modeled after the psychic vampire of the Hellfire Club in X-Men comics, the Black Queen Selene. And also in Greek mythology, Selene is considered to be the moon, and a selenophile is the name of someone who loves the moon. And in many of the posters for the film, you can often see Selene positioned with the moon in the background. And I thought that was a really cool touch. The story is set up really in her point of view. Selene is what they call a death dealer. She is a hunter of the lichens. She is personally invested in her job because she believes that lichens killed her family. And this sets up her motivation for what she does excellently. But she is also being manipulated. In the middle of all this, she has a natural instinct to protect Michael, who is an innocent, and this leads her to learn the truth about the vampires that she calls her family. It's unfortunate, but Selene is the only vampire that you ever like. The rest are just horrible, morally corrupt, and shallow. It's the first time in a movie that I don't like the vampires, and it wounds me to say that because I usually love them so. I never want Van Helsing to win. I always want Dracula to win. So this was a strange switch for me. Back to Selene, she is a dynamic action character. Flipping, jumping, punching, but mostly shooting her way out of every situation with her double-handed firing stance. She's incredible to watch, and with every battle, even though she's on the wrong team, I just felt as if I was getting more and more invested in her outcome. Selene's pet project right now, Michael Corvin, who is unknowingly an ancestor of the first lichen. The name Corvin is in connection to the real world, as it's referencing Corvinus of Moldavia, who was actually an ally to Vlad Tepes, the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Michael is just a human caught up in this war, selected to be the champion to destroy the elder vampires. He is likable, but he is a passive character for most of the film. And the only reason why I like him is because Selene likes him. By the end of the film, he proves his worth in the story as a great contender for Victor to battle. And in the middle of all of this, there's a love story brewing between Michael and Selene. Now we come to my favorite lichen, Lucian. He is presented as a very dangerous villain, but in truth, he is actually a guy forced to fight for his species as it is being hunted and exterminated. The film takes time to develop Lucian's character as he is the father figure to the other lichens, teaching them honor instead of giving in to their wild instincts. And it's through his leadership that the lichens make some headway by creating deadly UV bullets to battle the vampires. As well, Lucian has more to fight for as he was once in love with Sonia, who was Victor's daughter many years ago. She was pregnant with their child when Victor sentenced her to death for the betrayal of the coven. Lucian fights for the honor of his lost love, and that is the tragic Romeo and Juliet tale that we get in the story. The technical aspects. There are so many cool effects in this movie. It just amazes me that they were able to accomplish all of this with just $22 million. It just really looks like it's way more expensive. I also like the look of the lichens, and I was surprised that at the time when CGI was really heavily used in the early 2000s, they opted not to use this as often as I thought they would have. And they opted to shoot many of the action and effects sequences live without computer imagery. The practical effects are nothing short of amazing, along with the modern looking creature design of the wolves. I thought they looked really great. Some of the full-bodied CGI lichens are scattered in the film, but luckily they don't last long on screen. So, I'm not a fan of it because I think at the time the CGI creature designs were not up to par. I was also impressed by Victor's makeup during his revival into his normal skin. The detail, oh my god, is so immense, so masterfully used, and Bill Nye's extremely thin frame is used to the film's advantage to tell the story of a frail vampire on the brink of life, slowly being restored. It looked fantastic. The costumes were incredible. Besides the black leather popular in fashion at the time, the other ornamental pieces, jewelry, and coats were extravagantly decorated with old Celtic-inspired art. And I absolutely loved all of them, feeling somehow that they had captured the details of a glorious and ancient mythology. I especially liked the tomb design and set pieces. It had a very minimalistic design using the floor medallions as sort of locks for the unique hibernation chambers or coffins for the elders. Again, they utilized the Celtic style to ornament the metal. The action scenes in this film were quite impressive. Many of the people commented on how much it reminded them of The Matrix, released in 1999. And I agree, but The Matrix used the trend of its time, and many movies were using this darker, more grungy look at the world while using an exaggerated sense of leather fashions that were popular at the time. This is all perfect for the Underworld look, being set at night and having a very nightclub bluish tinge to everything. It really created the gothic energy for the film. Many of the shots were done in interesting angles and had a very gritty texture, a surrealistic look to them, which makes this film really stand out among so many other action films of its day. There were a few impressive transitions in the film, creating a graceful flow. The music had very haunting tones mixed with highly cinematic booms and a few screeching metal sounds, for almost as if it was part of the Foley. And I really enjoyed it a lot. The performances, I really enjoyed all of the performances, even the smaller roles. And I think the most striking performances really came from Michael Sheen and Bill Nye. They were over the top sometimes, but this is the kind of story that this kind of acting is okay. Victor and Lucian aren't normal people. They are mythological creatures that have been alive for a very long time. So I'll give them a pass to be outrageous characters. Many people thought that Kevin Graveau's voice in the film for his character Reyes was a special effect, but actually that's his natural speaking voice, and even his profile kind of looks like a wolf naturally. It's unique. So I think he was perfectly cast in the film, besides being one of the writers. The best part of the film, I really enjoyed the lichen transformations. I absolutely loved Michael's transformation. It was pretty spectacular, very detailed. Best parts For me also, any scene with Lucian in it. I mean, wow, he's just amazing. His regeneration scene, ejecting bullets out of his body, was pretty intense, and it still holds up. You know, they used just the right amount of CGI that it didn't swallow up the scene with fakeness. So it's a really great scene, and they do it kind of slow, and you kind of feel the pain with him, and it's a beautiful scene. I also enjoyed the creature designs. They were so good. I mean, I know some people complain that the Lycans were hairless and then they just didn't look like werewolves, and I think that was exactly what I enjoyed about them. They look different than you expected werewolves to look, and I think calling them Lycans and not werewolves really pressed home that they were different for me, and so my brain was able to process that difference. And I loved it. I loved that it was unique and they tried something different. Now, my wish list for the movie. I wish that the pacing was a little bit more concise and snippier. And I wish that there was a lot more Lucian in the film. He's just an amazing character to watch, and to me, it was a big mistake to kill him off in the film. He's just a dynamic character you just want to see more of. I wish that the vampires weren't so easily killed by the werewolves and really gave them a good fight, especially the elder vampire Amelia. I mean, she's almost completely wasted in this film because she's set up as this elder, and it would have been really cool to see her fight like we saw Victor fight. I mean, he absolutely crushes the Lycans without even trying. And in later movies, we get to see Marcus, who also is an elder. He's an incredible dynamic fighter. So why was Amelia such a weak and vulnerable character? It just didn't make sense, and she seems like a plot device. I also wish that Craven was a smarter villain. It just would have been really cool if he was more of like a sly fox, pretending to be on Selene's side, all the while throwing her off course. And this would really make his character way more juicier. Just give him some depth. And I wish he was just smarter. It would really make the biggest difference to his character. Now the ending. I really liked the ending. So the building story leads Lucian to bite Michael. And then circumstances lead Selene to have to bite Michael again, which turns him into this super mythological creature. I don't know what you would call him, but he is a hybrid of the two, and he is absolutely amazing. When he faces off with Victor, it is one of the most fabulous showdowns. I just love that scene. I just love a good old-fashioned boss battle at the end of any action movie, especially one like this. I also really liked where the story left off, with many questions and a nice string of bait for a possible sequel. Now, in summary, this film has a lot of flaws, a lot of questionable character decisions, but I really enjoyed the deep lore of the vampires and Lycans that it provided. Such a rich story. And the film leaves plenty of story possibilities in its wake, and there have been many sequels that followed. So, again, this is the kind of story you want to write as a writer. This is the story you want to tell as a director, as a filmmaker. And as a big fan of both werewolves and vampires, this film is pretty awesome. That sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers, and off to my next review.